Hope you guys like sci-fi because this is what we're gonna read. It's called Warp Angel by Stuart Hopen, and I'm not exactly sure what it's about, but she likes sci-fi, so we're gonna read it. At least the first chapter.
I'm gonna read an excerpt.
Chapter 1. The Fall. A beautiful woman wandered into a graveyard of angels. Collapsed cruisers and destroyed freight vessels littered the canyon in a panorama of rusting fuselages, struts, and frames. Once, these great ships could race faster than light, could dart into folds in the universe, shrug off substance, and spread measureless wings. But then, mankind discovered an unexpected, insidious danger. Warp travel is gradually eroding the structure of time and space itself. For the past 200 years, warp travel had been banned. A huge, cracked support beam threw shadows shaped like broken wings across the woman's almost bare back. Once a great pilot, Amelia Stratos didn't fly anymore either. A wild streak of white ran through her hair. She chose neither to dye nor rejuvenate it. Her nose was slightly too long, just slightly, but she left it as it was and never lacked for admirers. Her cerulean blue eyes obviously had been genetically engineered, but that was done without her consent, 2 generations before. She followed the sound of distant music, casually crossing a trail of glittering shattered windshields and silicon chips. Oxidized dust, the last iron from Earth, blew on the wind and stung Amelia's cheeks. Nearby, at a clearing in the rubble, a crowd paraded ceremoniously toward the largest of the old ships. The party was just beginning. Bright, freshly painted nihilistic designs decorated the great ship's flanks. Nostalgic melodies leaked from the rust holes across the 10-mile hull. As Amelia crossed the gangplank to the old ship, she surveyed the scene below. The most prominent citizens of the Draconian system milled about at ground level. Prancing fish who farmed the deep sea, chrome-skinned machine builders, and compound-eyed bodyguards who saw the world through 360-degree kaleidoscopes. Each wore a costume reflecting his craft, a kind of free advertising. A trapper wore elegant furs with the heads of animals still attached. He spoke to a healthcare worker who wore a necklace of sharpened scalpels above her bare breast. Weapons flashed occasionally, trade squabbles lighting up the crowd. Everyone was celebrating liberty. The Earthlings, who originally colonized the Draconian system, came here seeking freedom. No one is quite certain what they were seeking freedom from, but to this day, there are no laws and no governments. The system had been named with fierce irony. Generally, in the absence of law and currency, goods could only be obtained by pledging fealty to powerful commercial organizations, called bodies, or bods, in the local vernacular. The bods provided protection, shelter, clothing, food, amusements, everything. Those who did not belong to the bods had to depend on force of arms to sustain themselves. They had to barter at outrageously inflated values. That was the price of independence. Amelia was the only unicorp invited, and she wore an outfit of scanty, diaphanous scarves that were polarized, so they changed color and opacity when she moved. She would have preferred dressing more modestly for the evening. 40 years old, she didn't like displaying the way age had taken some of the firmness from her flesh. Yet the current fashions of the Draconian system tended to be revealing. Better to show how well she had preserved herself than invite conjecture by covering up. Inside the antique warp ship, smoke stained the air with stimulants. Amelia caught the ice and clove scent of cadmidine and the honey smell of cannabis. Thick bundles of wire hung like wreaths, decorated by printed circuit chips and fragments of machinery. Stars shone through man-sized rust holes in the ceiling. A reptilian humanoid greeted Amelia with a hiss, and he thrust forward a scaled, web-fingered hand. He was Ology. Ology,
I don't know.
the prime director of the Labor's Bod. Like many of the guests, he was a flamboyant product of microsurgery and chromosome splicing, trying to break with tradition, even on the genetic level. His gait betrayed years in ankle irons. He had once been a slave. "Welcome to our party," Ology said. "Enjoy your freedom. Use it to excess. Do what you will." Then he proffered a glass of foaming amber liquid. "Try some champagne?"
You're joking.
"Not at all. This is real champagne. We found some crates in an old cargo hold." Amelia accepted a hand-blown glass crafted from old photographs, especially for the occasion. The drink was a legendary symbol to a long, decadent culture. Real champagne hadn't been tasted in the Draconian system in 200 years, ever since the gutting of the warp ships permanently severed ties to Earth. With a dramatic flourish, she took a sip. It tasted bitter, vinegary, and vile. Amelia put on a false, polite smile, pretending to like it for a moment. Then she set the glass down and walked away. She could not hide her disappointment. "Everyone else is drinking it," shouted Ology. Amelia glanced around at the other guests. They seemed giddy, playing with the refuse on the floor. Ancient ballistic pistols or flanges from self-repairing mechanisms, curious remnants of a non-slave culture. Some were running their fingers through mounds of discarded coins. The jingling amused them. Amelia found it hard to believe that the tiny bits of round metal at her feet once symbolized value. What did their mass-produced designs have to offer? Why did these miniature portraits of old draconian pioneers provoke such melancholy? Was there some hidden meaning to the cryptic geometries and fast relief frills? Monetary systems had been abolished long ago. The coins had no value now, not even as curiosities. Neither did the old guns, nor the self-repairing mechanisms that occasionally jerked with the post-mortem spasms. The concept of antique value, like all antiques, had become a thing of the past. Amelia felt the vast, uncrossable distance between her world and the world of her ancestors. A young, fair-haired mercenary, his weapons on display, swaggered boldly up to Amelia. He said, "Place like this? Cramped, smoky, pistols all over the place, everyone trying to get into your pockets? Place like this, its rich woman shouldn't come along." He was barely more than a boy, too young, too pretty, and too dangerous. Amelia tried to turn away, but the boy caught her shoulder. "I'm Chef Carson. You may have heard of me. I'm the fastest rising member in the Merc Bod. I'll be your bodyguard tonight. I'll stick real close. No charge,"
No thanks.
said Amelia. He looked like an angel, with soft curly blonde hair, but his eyes were full of blue cruelty. He wore a low-slung belt decorated with holographic icons of immeasurable depth. It was obvious that the religious imagery meant nothing to him, for the belt had been hung in a position that drew attention to the boy's loins. "You know, there's people here getting drunk for the first time ever. They get real unpredictable. They're like cocked guns. You should be afraid."
I'm afraid you're an idiot.
Chev reached for a conveniently handy gun. He toyed with the trigger, deciding what to do. In a momentary lapse, Amelia had forgotten how to deal with boys. She had forgotten how impulsive and violent they could be. Trying to look calm, she now regretted leaving her armed escorts back at her flyer.
Do you think you can always get what you want by frightening people?
Amelia asked. "Yeah," said Chev Carson. "There was only one girl in my life who ever paid attention to me. She always said I terrified her. She was a hit." His hand lingered on the gun. A member of the mortician squad approached the couple with slow, even steps. He was the only one in the room unbothered by the aura of imminent disaster. He seemed drawn to it. "Carson is not to blame for this rude behavior," said the mortician. "Mex can't handle liquor." "I'm not. I can't," said Chev. He turned his attention to ancient statuettes of cherubim that adorned the trimmings on the corridor. He began shooting off the wings. "Chev's possession allows little opportunity to drink," continued the mortician, his face showing no emotion. Pale, gray, waxy makeup covered his complexion. "And Chev has fallen victim to the uneasiness of this place. We all feel it. Because of the rust. Rust is a symbol of death,"
Everything is a symbol of death to you.
said Amelia, and Chev laughed. "This place also reminds us that beautiful things fall into ruin," said the mortician, casting a measured glance at Amelia. Chev belched up a bolus of air that stank of liquor and vinegar. He leveled his gun at Amelia's head. A red targeting dot appeared on her brow. She opened her mouth, about to protest, when the sky burst into fire. The night was glittering brightly through the rest holes. Suddenly, it had become a dazzling canopy of opal. Chev now stared drunkenly upward. It looked as if a fireworks display had started. Amelia sucked in the smoky air, gasping, amazed she hadn't been shot. She took the opportunity to bolt. She started a stampede. All of the other guests followed, rushing to see the fireworks. Wild, uninhibited laughter, like children's laughter, echoed through faded velvet hallways. Amelia put the crowd between her and Chev. Once outside, she whistled for her slaves. A contingent of armed, muscular bodyguards hustled from Amelia's cruiser. She waited until they surrounded her, then started to walk back with them, toward the cruiser. The crowd was roaring. Amelia caught the faint smell of fried air. The rumble of battle cruisers breaking the sound barrier made her pause. Lasers were hissing high over her head. It was not a fireworks display erupting across the sky, but rather a dogfight. 4 small ships weaved beautiful colors in all directions. Light filtered through precious jewels. Light from the killing end of the spectrum. The dogfight held Amelia's attention. She recognized the make of 3 of the warships, Ruinators. They flew in formation, bearing the logos of the Slaver's Bod. Their funneled engine housings cut entropy with a variation of pyramid power. Very effective fighting machines. The 4th ship, the Ruinator's quarry, looked strange. Some kind of highly customized variation of a very old model. Wanderers, they were called, one of the earliest one-seat fighters. Useless ornaments adorned the Wanderer's frame. Though the ornaments had been brightly polished, they still looked like junk. Heavy chrome lions crossed paws on the prow, just above a seat of brass ram's horns. Crystal globes dangled freely on chains underneath the wing struts. Shocking red fins placed haphazardly across the fuselage contributed nothing to aerodynamics. It should have been a rattletrap, yet somehow it managed to evade the Ruinators. The Wanderer jerked across the sky at irregular speeds that would vary suddenly, anywhere from 1,100 to 4,000 knots. Amelia couldn't tell if the engines were malfunctioning or if the haphazard pace was deliberate to make the ship a difficult target. One of the Ruinators scored a hit, though not a serious one. Sparks flew from the Wanderer's hull. The Ruinators jetted in closer. "Great, huh?" said Elegy, addressing the crowd. "The Ruinators, they cost plenty. I bet the guy they're chasing won't get away. I bet 1,000 slaves." Amelia studied the sky battle. Despite the clear advantage the Ruinators held, both in number and in firepower, they had not scored any crippling blows.
"I'll take that bet, Elegy,"
she said. Suddenly, the Wanderer bled airspeed, dropping straight down, trapping the Ruinators in a treacherous overshoot. They zoomed past. When it bobbed back up, the Wanderer faced 3 sets of afterburners, in a perfect kill position. It could pick off any of the Ruinators at will. A strategically placed series of light stabs from the Wanderer amputated a pair of geometrically variable wings from the rearmost Ruinator. Crippled, the Ruinator dropped. Pure, dead weight. It hit the ground spinning, raising giant fans of oxidized dust among the ruins. The amputated wings sailed gracefully on their own, past the horizon. Amelia couldn't repress a grin.
Well done,
she commented, shading her eyes from the glare. She sensed that the Wanderer's pilot was a woman, luring her opponents into a recklessness by feigning vulnerability. A woman's tactics.
Almost as good as I used to do,
she thought. The remaining 2 Ruinators snap-rolled and peeled in opposite directions, maneuvering to catch the Wanderer with a prong formation. The Wanderer snapped into an 8G bat turn, lofting to a face-to-face kill position with one of the Ruinators. It was a nervy and dangerous move, a gamble on having faster reflexes than the Ruinator. It was a gamble that paid off, as the Wanderer unleashed a quick burst of fractured rainbows. Despite its age, the Wanderer had very modern guns. The Ruinator's nose erupted like a volcano. Dead, the Ruinator turned 90 degrees, then tumbled from the sky with a sudden rush of shrieking air. Globes of melted metal rained into its wake. The other Ruinator was forced to swerve and barely avoided impact. The Wanderer was not such a bad ship after all. The old model had spawned countless imitations. Even the Ruinators followed the same basic design. The second Ruinator pulled back, sobered and cautious. Its pilot planned to strike from a distance, taking advantage of the ship's advanced weaponry. The Wanderer looped, rolled, and weaved among the rusting hulks, no longer making any pretense about its capacity for speed or its maneuvering abilities. The brass ram's horn bellowed as the ship accelerated. The chains whipped around and rattled. With manual aiming nearly impossible, the Ruinator engaged its computerized targeting system. Fine beams of red light established a grid across the sky. A great flaming net spread in all directions, with the Ruinator in the center. The Wanderer's ornamentation, that elaborate, shining, absurd-looking mess, took hit after hit. A flash of force sheared off one of the ram's horns. Fins flew loose, the chains went whistling free, and yet the Wanderer's flight pattern showed no signs of injury. Amelia began to understand. The ship's decorations were a disguise, suggesting foolish and easy prey, and more. The absurd facade decoyed fire away from vital areas. The Wanderer ejected clumps of tinsel through its ballast tubes. The tinsel drifted, deflecting the ruby grid vectors. The fire net tore open, causing the Ruinator shots to go wild. The onlookers scrambled. While the Ruinator's targeting system choked on tinsel, the Wanderer climbed to pure vertical, then looped around to 10 Gs, a maneuver called a St. Angelo Immelman. It carried nasty risk for C-spine fractures, but it proved to be another astute combat decision. After scoring 2 severe hits on the underbelly of the Ruinator, the Wanderer swerved out of the way. Plumes of smoke flowed from both impact sites. The Ruinator swung into hard pursuit. With a burst of power, it gained on the Wanderer. The smoke plumes thinned into translucent threads as the Ruinator's speed increased. The distance between the two ships narrowed. The Ruinator hung dangerously close now. The Wanderer weaved and dodged, trying to lead its pursuer to wreckage against jutting frames and useless cannons in a rusting maze. The Ruinator's pilot steered a course that showed no regard for caution.
He must be severely wounded. He flies like he has nothing to lose,
Amelia commented. Ology grunted. The Ruinator let loose a volley of bright flashes. Half of the Wanderer's left tail fin split into fragments. The Ruinator was too close to avoid flying into the tail debris, which immediately skittered harmlessly over his windshield. Wobbling, but holding the air, the Wanderer left a wide trail of smoke. Seriously crippled, it careened toward the party ship. Then the Wanderer escaped into one of the biggest rust holes, disappearing inside the ancient hulk. The Ruinator followed into ruin. The great hulk shook. The crowd heard sounds of internal battle, the small ships crashing through decayed decks and firing at one another. Trapped echoes rumbled. Smoke poured out of the rust holes in streams that blotted out the stars. The stink of various carbon compounds spread with the smoke. A loud growl began to shake the hulk. Suddenly, a fireball blew out the hulk's 2-mile posterior. Not far from the point of the explosion, the Wanderer shot through the vista view. A huge window built along the observation decks for warp tourists. The window fell apart on impact, with a high-pitched whine and a troubled shower of sound. Transparent metal musically ricocheted off the surrounding junkyard ships. The Wanderer skidded to a halt at the fringe of the crowd. "Is anyone hurt?" asked the woman wearing the scalpels. "No," shouted Ology, not bothering to check. "No," shouted Ology, not bothering to check. A few party guests crept forward to inspect the wreckage. Heat was radiating from the scab-textured sides of the Wanderer. Cracked engines hissed and sprayed scalding oil, anointing the hood of the fallen spacecraft. The pilot, a woman, as Amelia had surmised, crawled out through a jagged opening. Foreign-looking, almond-shaped eyes smoldered beneath the shadows of the pilot's helmet. Amber starbursts on the green irises surrounded her adrenaline-bloated pupils. The stiff collar of her flight suit had been zipped all the way up to her jawline. A rough-hewn cloth covered every part of her body except her face and the lower part of her right leg. The sharp white point of a snapped tibia had torn the fabric when it pierced her shin. At her side, the leg lay twisted awkwardly. The exposed bone shined bright as polished metal. Blood dripped from the girl's leg wound, and fuel bled from her ship. Both gathered in puddles, not quite mixing, red globes bobbing in amber depths. The pilot's features contorted with pain. She might have been pretty under other circumstances. Possibly. It was too hard to tell. 3,000 slaves to anyone who kills her, shouted Ology. Chev Carson lunged forward, his gun already unholstered.
"Don't shoot!"
shouted Amelia. "Why not?" asked Chev. "What do I care if you win your bet?"
"Don't shoot! You'll ignite the spilled fuel and kill us all."
Amelia was right. He couldn't use the gun. Whipping around, searching for a knife, he moved swiftly, but the booze upset his equilibrium. His body wasn't equal to the demands he was making on it. Fumbling for a blade, he sliced his thumb. Then he sucked on the cut, hoping he hadn't accidentally poisoned himself, lethally or otherwise. The crowd started laughing. Chev turned, his third rotation in less than a minute, trying to see what was so funny. Thumb still in his mouth, he lost his balance and fumbled forward. As he fell into the puddle, blood and fuel splashed. The fallen pilot reached through her shattered windshield, groping for something. Finally, a pistol had come to hand. A number of mercs and bodyguards pushed their way through the crowd, their blades glinting. The fallen pilot fired her gun, not at any particular target, but straight up into the air. She held the pistol high, its light beam stabbing up to heaven. As she waved her hand, the beam swayed from side to side with an almost hypnotic rhythm, like a magic wand of infinite size. The mercs resheathed their blades. They dared not kill her. If she died, her gun would fall. The beam would ignite the fuel, and the ensuing fireball would incinerate everything within a half-mile radius. The crowd began to creep backward, slowly. Only Amelia stepped forward.
Trust me,
She said.
I bet heavily on you tonight. I saved your life a moment ago. You can trust me. You saved your own life too,
Said the pilot. She seemed totally self-contained. Her face was a mask, a shell.
You'll never get out of here alone,
Said Amelia.
You'll bleed to death, soon, if you just sit there.
The pilot thrust her arm forward to show how rigidly she could hold it.
With the light reaching all the way up to God, I don't waver. I can slow my heart and hold my blood in my veins, and I can still keep alert. I can go on like this for days if I must, and if I die, I won't die alone. You don't want to die. I'm not afraid. You are a survivor. I knew that about you just watching the way you fly. If you want to live, you are going to have faith in me. Faith is a gamble, girl, but gambling has its own rewards. Faith is better than certain death.
The pilot scanned the crowd. Despite her bravado, small tremors afflicted her arm.
All right,
She said.
I swear you can trust me.
Amelia snapped her fingers, and her slaves came forward.
Carry her to the ship.
Amelia commanded.
I don't have any choice,
Said the pilot.
I must go with you, but I won't be carried by slaves.
She snapped off the light beam, but the gun muzzle still glowed white-hot.
You give me your hand.
Amelia approached the wreckage. She hoisted the girl to her feet. Amelia's slaves, weapons out, parted the crowd. Leaning on Amelia for support, the girl hobbled slowly past the vinegar-scented revelers. Amelia had never seen anyone dressed as modestly as this girl, in opaque, formless clothing. She felt nearly naked holding the girl at her side. They were both out in the open, painfully displayed and exposed. Assassins scurried for good positions, jostling the onlookers. The girl watched the spaces in the crowd, the openings between onlookers' limbs. Suddenly, she fired her still-hot pistol at a mercenary who had taken cover behind a row of bare knees. A shower of sizzling brains erupted from inside the crowd, and a merc slumped forward. Two more mercs jumped into the clearing, only to be cut down by Amelia's bodyguard slaves. As Amelia and the girl drew closer to Amelia's craft, the crowd rolled in closer, like an onrushing tide, covering the clear path behind them. Would-be assassins shoved against reckless onlookers, each competing for the best views. The air stunk of musk and barbecue smoke. As Amelia and the pilot mounted the steps to the escape craft, gunlight flashed on all sides. Without hesitation, Amelia's slaves threw themselves around her as a living, though not for long, shield. Amelia hurried the girls through the doorway.
Some of your slaves are wounded out there, still alive.
Said the girl, as the cabin door closed down behind her.
We can't leave them. Someone with an eye for value will pick them up.
Said Amelia.
They were good slaves, and well worth more than the cost of a little medical care.
She snapped her fingers, and the slave in the cockpit revved the engines.
Let me handle liftoff,
Said the girl.
We're under fire. Slaves' reflexes are worthless, so is their judgment. I can get us out of here. You're in no condition. With God's help.
The girl passed out. She was right, though. Amelia pushed her slave pilot aside and took the controls herself. She sailed through a volley of pistol fire that erupted from the crowd. Fortunately, the handguns weren't strong enough to pierce the shielding on her cruiser. It was good to fly again. Ultrasonic vapor trailed from her wingtips as she pushed the ragged envelope of the summer world. The ineffectual light of the handguns chased her all the way into space.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so that was an excerpt from Warp Angel by
Stuart Hopen.
Stuart Hopen. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for our next reading.
Chaos Come Again!
No, Chaos Come Again by Wilhelm Bard.
Wilhelmina Baird.
Wilhelmina Baird.
Ooh.
Okay, we're done.